Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, a place where you can keep informed of the latest business and tech trends by listening to stories of other people in your field and how they are overcoming challenges with emerging technologies. Join me in learning from the guests actionable tips and lessons learned to obtain greater clarity on how you or your business can leverage technology. Every day I beam your ears to a different part of the world, and today I'm going to take you on a trip to Germany to speak with Dirk Schrader about Netwrix's new cloud security report. And that report found that 88% of UK organisations store sensitive data in the cloud. No surprise there. But it could be left vulnerable to cyber attacks, and of that data, 65% of that information is personally identifiable information of customers, and 42% was of the employees. So today I want to discuss those research findings and also learn more about what companies can do to take full advantage of the cloud and all that it can bring, while also remaining safe from cloud cyber risk. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Germany to speak with Dirk Schrader. So, massive warm welcome to the show, Dirk. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Certainly I can. Thanks, Neil. First of all, thanks for having me here. At Netwrix, my role has two central aspects, put it that way. One is to serve as the CISO for the EMEA arena, while the other one, which is probably of more interest for the listeners, is that as the VP of Security Research. When saying VP of Security Research, usually you talk about what is your focus. For me, it was always a thing to be, on the one hand side, kind of generic, where generic is about, as a topic, is cyber resilience. So how can we be better in withstanding an attack? How can we achieve cyber resilience? How can we maintain it? And on the other hand, we're talking about focused research. Focused research covers questions about specific sectors like healthcare or manufacturing, and also trends about certain topics in our world of cybersecurity, like cloud security, where we recently published a report about. For me as a person, 25 years, even more of my career, IT career, I spent in cybersecurity. Ages ago, I started as a support engineer at Commodore. Yeah, my first computer was a C64. Yeah. I have to admit that. I love to collect old tech, I have to admit. If you look at communications technology today, they have their origins back there. And talking about books, The Victorian Internet is a good one to read. And I'm a fan of large Rubik's Cubes.
Do you still have a Commodore 64 in your house somewhere?
No, unfortunately not.
I know there's been a few re-release versions, but they're just not the same. And there's so many guests on here that have said that their career could be traced back to that Commodore 64 and copying code out of books.
Yeah, and folks are sort of battling with the sort of Sinclair C64 and all these initial things. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And of course, the first graphical UI, me using an Amiga 500 and Amiga 2000. Oh gosh, don't make me talk about Commodore here.
Oh man, the Amiga 500. I lost most of my a good 5 years playing Championship Manager on that Amiga 500. But as for Netwrix, I'm conscious there's going to be a few people listening that are hearing about you for the first time. And my understanding is that you're simplifying how professionals can control sensitive, regulated and business critical data, regardless of where it resides. And that's so important now with all these multi-cloud environments. But can you offer a bit of an overview of the kind of problems that you're helping your customers overcome?
The control of sensitive data, of valuable data to your business is one of the main aspects of what we do. For sure, that is an interesting topic for many organizations out there due to regulations, compliance, whatever kind of driver is behind it. And basically, with the term data is the new oil, heavily overused, admittedly. There is an honest part in it. If you are not in control of your data, you're risking your business. But that's what is behind that is that you have to be effective in using that control over your sensitive and valuable data. And that for that, you need to have an approach across the three layers of IT, which is data, identities, and infrastructure. Yeah. First of all, you need to know where's your data, what kind of identities are using them, and what is the infrastructure these identities use. And this is in parallel to keeping in sort of NIST cybersecurity framework in mind, for example. If you go from bottom to top, so from infrastructure to data, the first layer is infrastructure, where you are there to establish a secure, stable base, knowing what kind of assets you have, or in NIST words, identifying hardware, software, cloud instances, reducing the attack surfaces of these assets, the protect part from NIST, and making sure that you have a control of any change that is happening to that stable base. New software, new hardware, whatever it's there, or updates and patches every time, basically every moment in the life of an infrastructure asset, it changes. And if you lose control of that change process, you're broadening your attack surface. And the second layer, that middle layer, is to orchestrate your identities that they have zero standing privileges. And it shouldn't matter whether that is a service account or a real person account, whether it's on a server or a desktop or in the cloud. And that's the next layer of control about this element of three layers. And the upper layer, is actually control of sensitive, regulated, mission-critical data. If you don't have the lower layers, the upper layer is hanging out, so to say. If that's the right word to use it. Yeah. If you want to know where that kind of data is stored, be it on a network share, on a database, in cloud folders, and data buckets, or who has access to that data, that's what Netwrix can offer, can bring to the table, plus the things mentioned before. So data, identities, infrastructure, control over these three layers is what we do.
And one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today was after I was reading your cloud data security report, which I found online. So just for anyone listening, can you just give me a little background on that report to set the scene for today's conversation?
Sure thing. We're doing this survey since 2019.
Yeah.
And that in itself allows us to compare results over time. And when cloud migration, cloud data, using of cloud, adoption of cloud, we're talking about this since about a little bit more than since 2019, about, let's say, 5 to almost 10 years. But let's put it 2017, 2016 was still sort of the boom in there. So everyone wants to move to the cloud. We are 100% cloud-based and stuff like that. So for us, the element of asking similar questions over time is identifying trends, is identifying issues with cloud adoption. And for example, for this year, we had about 720 IT professionals responding to our questions to be included in the report from all over the world. And also from UK companies of all sizes. The interesting part is that when you look at it from a sector point of view, we had everything in there from technology, manufacturing, finance, healthcare, education. One sentiment that can be sort of phrased on as a envelope for this year's report is reality check. Back in 2019, many promises were up in the air. What companies can get from cloud adoption. Now it's time to draw a line and see what the reality is.
And one of the standout stats for me in the report was, I think it was 88% of UK organisations store sensitive data in the cloud where it can be left vulnerable to cyber attacks. But can you expand on that findings? Because I suspect many business leaders will be unaware of those vulnerabilities.
Well, first of all, the 80% in the UK, or 88% in the UK, sorry, that's aligned with the status we have identified in all the geos we have in the report. From a global perspective, we are at 80% of the companies that do store sensitive data in the cloud. Being left to vulnerable to a cyber attack is about the difference in the security architecture that is required when an organization moves infrastructure and data to the cloud. That, again, is a kind of a common experience with all respondents. If you look at it from a geo perspective, the one thing that also comes into the picture here is how companies, US organizations, UK organizations, German organizations, folks from France or whatever, look at sensitive data in itself. So I would say it's nothing really special about the high percentage of UK organizations storing sensitive data in the cloud. The way they are handling that, the way European companies are handling that, is certainly different than companies in the US, simply because of the regulations behind it. GDPR, or what UK will do with the sort of new approach to data in its recent legislative approach, are still quite different in the concept of what makes data and how data should be regulated compared to what happens in the US at the moment.
And when you combine those stats with the fact that threats to this data were ubiquitous, with 52% of surveyed UK companies reporting that a cyber attack on their cloud infrastructure has occurred within the last 12 months, when you put all that together, it's quite alarming, isn't it? What did you take away from that?
You know that in some way, I do, Neil. It has been said before. It's only a matter of time for a company to experience a cyber attack and a subsequent breach. The disturbing part, really, really disturbing aspect is that when moving to the cloud, detecting an attack has become harder for those organizations, not easier, which was one of the promises that you have better security moving to the cloud. For the individual company, it has become harder. It has become more difficult to say, yeah, we are under attack, or we have experienced a breach.
If you break down these stats, what are the most common types of attacks that you're seeing? I suspect ransomware is right up there, but is there any in particular that you're seeing more than others?
In that sense, we're talking about phishing, account compromise. So phishing relates to ransomware. I mean, someone starts to send you something to actually begin a ransomware attack and something like that. So it's phishing, account compromise, targeted attacks on cloud infrastructure. So really being specific after the infrastructure in the cloud, where for the latter point, it is something where the organizations have to be sure that they clearly understand the split responsibilities between their own security teams and the security team of the cloud provider. Because that's one of the sort of underlying elements here in these common types of attacks, simply because coming back to that previous point where the promise of enhanced security is there. With that promise comes sort of an expectation. I'll move to the cloud and everything is handled for me, which is not the case. There is a split responsibility. You're moving your data to the cloud, and you still bear the responsibility for securing the data. And even in the terms and conditions of the cloud service providers, it is stated there. If whatever you operate in the cloud as a virtual instance, the operations, the security of that virtual instance is your responsibility. And from a technical perspective, it should be, and it can only be your responsibility as an organization, simply because if the cloud service provider would do more on that, it would mean, to a certain extent, having access to your data, which you don't want. Here we go, catch-22 sort of thing. But phishing, account compromise, targeted attacks, these are the most common types that we have seen when we're talking about attacks on cloud during the cloud adoption.
And of course, you live and breathe this space, and you've probably been giving these warnings for many years now. And did anything surprise you in the report, though?
Basically, that disturbing part I mentioned before.
Yeah.
The more tools, larger budgets. Despite these things, IT teams were slower to detect the threats in 2022 than in 2020. I mean, someone listening to me would say, I didn't get a larger budget. I didn't get more tools. I have a smaller team now due to the pandemic. Point taken. It's not light and bright out there in terms of the burden carried by IT security teams. The thing here is, if we are, and one of the most significant slowdowns was in the area of supply chain compromises and ransomware. If we are seeing that as a trend, that the complexity provided with adopting the cloud, and we're talking about what are the architectural differences in this on-prem and cloud infrastructure elements. That's the most important thing to keep in mind. If you are using something in the cloud, be aware of that. Organizations need to implement more security controls and spending more money to stay safe. And 49% confirmed their cloud security budget increased in 2022. But more tools doesn't always mean more security. If you have point solutions from different vendors operating separately, just kind of offering overlapping or sometimes even conflicting functionality, you are requiring your own support teams to deal with multiple vendors, with multiple tools that offer a functionality that doesn't match together. In the consequence, you have a security gaps building up because of this sort of non-existing overlap, even if it's promised, or we're coming back to that Swiss cheese layer model, I guess. One way to solve this problem is to build a security architecture with a selected smaller group of trusted vendors that develop and offer and support, probably the most important element of it, an extensive portfolio of solutions. In that sense, if you are as an organization trying to manage security for on-prem and for cloud instances, you need to look at this sort of overlap between the architectures, that your trusted vendors can handle both architecture approaches. If it's not the case, you will always have to find ways with the gaps coming out of it or being a consequence of it, that the gaps create that difficulty to detect the attack.
And we will have people listening all over the world. And the one thing we all share, of course, is that we're all living in a climate of constant cybersecurity risk. And here in the UK, from the report, I think 65% of respondents named integration with existing IT environments as a main factor that's slowing down cloud adoption in their organisation. So a fairly big question for you here. But what do you think companies should be doing to take full advantage of the cloud and all that can bring to the organisation, while also remaining safe from cloud cyber risk?
The original promise of, or drivers, might be the better way to say that, is for a planned move to the cloud was cost and improved security. You can talk to anyone you want, and probably within the first three sentences, asking them, why do you move to the cloud? The term cost and improved security will show up. In essence, the two expectations in itself, I want to reduce my cost and I want to improve my security, are creating conflicts for the move itself. The first conflict is that the move itself will need time and tooling, and in turn budget. It's not a copy and paste thing. You don't look at your own on-premise infrastructure and say, I just copy and paste it to the cloud. It doesn't work. A company in itself has built a process about how data is used, how data is handled, altered, enriched for its business purposes. And the two, on-prem and cloud infrastructure, are very different. So what you need is clarity about that specific operation, part of it or all of it, that should be moved to the cloud, not the machines. The operation is important. How do you handle data? How do you process data in your business operations? If you just copy and paste physical machines as virtual machines into the cloud, it's not going to work. It's going to open up a security disaster. The next step then is to define the handover points, thinking about a partial move, and always you will have some sort of physical device remaining in your infrastructure, remaining in your premises, is how is data transferred from your on-prem infrastructure, specifically when you are in manufacturing, into the cloud systems. And how's that force and back these handover points? Securing this redesigned operations is about the different way orchestration, automation, access control, change control, identity management, data discovery, and the most important part, responsibilities are handled with the selected cloud service provider. Our tools are able to span across both walls, so to provide a clear view about your company's security posture. The element is that your tooling needs to be up to par with that enhanced complexity. And that enhanced complexity is basically inescapable and in its connection to any move to the cloud.
And we've talked a lot today about many of the problems and equally the solutions, about the role that Netwrix plays in all this. But what makes you hopeful about the future?
There are a few things. Number one is when looking at the results in our report, most of the security measures that should be applied to these three layers, data, identity, and infrastructure, have been marked as either already in use or as planning to use, with only less than 10% of the responding companies staying behind. That is that thing that makes me hopeful for the future. Will we get rid of security issues? No, not now. We are human beings. We do make errors. It will always be an issue. Security in itself can't be 100% solved by technology. Technology supports us, but we are, as humans, are the ones to solve these security issues. There are still improvements required from the report. Yeah. Going back to the split in responsibilities, for example, what is needed as an improvement is controlling the posture of both on-prem and cloud assets, or being able to classify the data that exists on both sides, following identities, how identities are moving around. If you look at an organization, a larger one, let's say, a person, an individual is moving around in the organization, is promoted, gets a new responsibility, the job description changes. And with these sort of moves, also identities and privileges, your data identities are evolving. So this element of control, what happens on-prem, in the cloud, how does that fit together? What do I make out of it? What is the context of it? That's the part where improvement is needed. But from that amount of things companies do in addressing data identity and infrastructure, we are on a good way.
Fantastic. I think it's a beautiful moment to end on. But before I let you go, first of all, a big thank you for taking the time to share your insights with everyone listening today. But I'm going to ask you to leave everyone listening with one final gift, and that is maybe a book that has inspired you, important to you, or something that you've read recently that you would recommend that we can add to our Amazon wish list. Is there any book or anything you'd like to leave us with today?
It would be difficult to state or to name a single book. So if you don't mind, allow me to name 3.
Of course.
Number 1, failure is not an option. You have heard that statement, I guess, if you are loving movies as I do.
Yeah.
That statement comes from Gene Kranz, the famous NASA flight director. When reading the book, what stands out for me is the approach to operations. It is the way a company operates its tools, its cybersecurity tools, that will make the difference in the future. And therefore, if you're interested in a systemic approach to operations, to training, to awareness of what's going on, to simulations, that's the book to go. Second one, Modern Cybersecurity, Tales from the Near Distant Future, where several authors have provided their views about how the concept of cybersecurity will evolve in the next few years. It's quite an amount of food for thought in it. And the final one is Understand, Manage, and Measure Cyber Risk by a guy called Ryan Leervik. I mean, lots has been written about managing cyber risk, and I've actually have plenty of books about that here in my bookshelves. This one actually offers a good practical approach about how to do it.
Fantastic. Well, I will add all 3 of those to our Amazon wish list. And for anyone that picks them up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And finally, before I let you go, could you just remind everyone listening where they can find you online? Maybe check out the report, and equally contact your team if they've got any questions. What's the best starting point for everything?
As usual, www.netwrix.com.
Yeah.
On Twitter, the handle is Netwrix. In the same way, you can find us as Netwrix Corporation on LinkedIn. And if the link to the cloud report, which also includes, of course, the statistics for the United Kingdom, is your direct starting point, go to www.netwrix.com/2022_cloud_data_security_report.html.
Well, I'll add the links to all of those just to make it easy for people to get access to that. And as I said a few moments ago, a big thank you for coming on here and talking about that cloud security report, discussing the research findings and what companies can do to take full advantage of the cloud and all it can bring to an organization with that added agility and etc. But while also remaining safe from cloud cyber risk. Incredibly important. And you even left us with 3 great books too. So thanks again, Dirk. I know that every podcast you listen to will have a message from your host telling you to please leave a rating and review. But in a world where we're all ruled by algorithms, it really does help the show reach more listeners. So please, if you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a review. So a big thank you to Dirk for discussing the research findings and what more companies can do to take full advantage of the cloud and all it can bring to an organisation, while also remaining safe from cloud cyber risk. But now I hand the microphone back over to you. Let me know your thoughts by simply emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or visiting my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. I always like to finish every episode by saying technology works best when it brings people together. And the fact that you tune in every single day further proves that point. So I hope you'll join me again tomorrow. But a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.